Hello, everybody. Chad Eves here. Today, we're going to go over an article that appeared recently in the Wall Street Journal talking about how organizations are requiring people to return to office, or at the very least, asking them to do that. Now, this is a big change, and it's another change on top of another change that people have gone through in the past couple of years as far as being members of a workforce. When the pandemic started, everything happened from people not working anymore to people going into a remote work pattern, just depending on what you did. Now, for decisions to return to office, it's important that leaders understand why this decision is being made. There are many legitimate business reasons. It could be anything from is a policy decision that executives have decided to a financial aspect potentially, or something that can't be replicated in remote work, and many other different factors. There's also legitimate reasons for people to want to continue working remotely. And this is one of the things that leaders need to be prepared for. And it's happening right now is when people object. When people say, no, I'm not going to come back to the office, or I don't want to come back to the office. Because there's also some legitimate questions from their perspective. And by understanding why the organization is making this decision now, why leaders are doing this now, you can have a higher likelihood of a better outcome for everybody involved. If it was so important to do this, why didn't it happen sooner? That could be one question. And it can really become a problem of timing and perception to decide to do a return to office now. And this is because there's been a shift in the labor market that has tilted ever so slightly back into the favor of employers. There's a lot of layoffs going on right now, even with a dearth of employees for a lot of jobs. But there's been this shift, and companies, have this advantage or this lever that they didn't have a year ago, to where people could just go and find another job anywhere else. There are significant layoffs happening in the economy right now, and this could be perceived as somewhat heavy-handed, or a power play of some type, which can also, negatively impact a relationship between an organization, their leaders, and their workforce. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that's the case, that it's for any of those reasons, but that can be the perception that could override legitimate business needs. Change is hard. We talked about this in the past couple of years. People went from their normal work arrangements to no work or remote work, and back something to hybrid work or traveling again, or the whole spectrum. And people have to adjust to that change, and a lot of times they want to understand what's driving that change. Now, if the decision of the organization and its leaders are to come down with the edict of do it because I said so, that can cause a lot of problems as well. Especially when people have become less tolerant of what they perceive as poor leadership and bad organizations. They might go by this for the short term, but are the organizations likely to get that higher level of performance that they're claiming they're going to get when everybody returns to the office, when people really don't want to be there and they don't feel like that they have been treated in an adult way for why this needs to happen? Is the Great Resignation over? I think is another question. We saw the two of the biggest things is feeling like a person belongs and that they can contribute, and that contribution is valued. And when that doesn't happen, that's what drives people to leave. And there's a risk that that same thing could happen with these decisions and this push to get back to the office. That's why when you understand exactly why you're doing it and how you're going to communicate it, not just do it because I say so, you build more consensus, you build more buy-in. And that way, maybe it prevents another chapter of the Great Resignation being written for your organization. This can also become a really good opportunity for good leadership and sound strategy through your communication. Maybe now's not the best time for a push to return to office unless there is a legitimate business need underlying it that it needs to happen now. If that's the case, be prepared to talk to your people, to explain what's going on as much as you can and build a consensus, build, this agreement for people to do that. Also, if you can delay it a little bit versus the time when it could be seen to be a power play, that might be an option. But also review how you're communicating, how you're leading, what's the desired outcome that you really want to get to. If it's not strictly just people in seats, if there is the business reason, that's what needs to be communicated and shared. Another option to consider is, how do you gather workforce input? When your workforce feels like it's been heard in some fashion, whether it's representation on some committee or group or whatever it might be, they're probably more likely to go by the decision when they feel like they've at least been heard. So return to office, big change, big topic, not always going to go smooth. There's objections happening, but you can minimize those objections and even build a stronger workforce relationship as a leader by understanding why you're doing something and having a way to explain it that will, make sense to people, build consensus, and strengthen professional relationships.